Hi, I'm David King, the editor and associate publisher of The Collaborative. I want to welcome you to the site for the first time. Today we have Nadine Medina of the Troy Dance Factory on, and I think it's really appropriate given that what we're doing with The Collaborative really explores the creative process. And this week, you'll see on the site, there's a lot of content sort of headlined by Katie Cusack's story about Nadine's work with local musicians and choreographing to their work. Along with that are some of Nadine's columns about the process, and that sort of goes beyond dance, including how to get paid when you're creative, experimentation, improvisation, and we have some galleries that include the work she's done with local musicians. So I think it should give you an example of what we're going to be doing at the Collaborative and digging into the arts and the creative process and the creative economy. Of course, there's a lot more on the site for you to explore, columns by a number of other folks, in-depth features on artists and local places. And we just wanted to give you an overview of some of the things that we'll be doing going forward. So, Katie, what do you think? The site's finally up.
Yeah, finally. It's been a long time coming. A lot of work, sweat and tears went into it. Kind of. I don't know. I don't want to be too dramatic. Yeah, we have been working on stories for a few months now, getting things ready for our readers and to sort of frame what we're going to be sharing and what we'll be covering, exploring creatives and the way that they operate and navigate in their fields and the places they work and live and create in. Yeah, and we're taking trips to places that we weren't really going before, expanding our creative area and what, I guess, the definition of the capital region and how small or how big it can be and what's worth checking out in our outer boundaries. And then, getting to know, just going a little bit deeper into what creative people are doing and why they do it and why the method that they use to create their art works best for them and maybe another method wouldn't. And it's just, I feel like helps open the idea of creative arts in such an interesting way. For people especially who are maybe interested in getting into these fields and don't really know what would be best for them, they can explore, well, how did this person do it? And, well, that I don't know if that really works for me, but maybe you are reading that story about that person, but then you read another column in that same general field and you're like, okay, well, that maybe might work, but maybe I find something that works for me in between, and you start to be able to explore these different ways. So it's exploring, but it's also kind of serving artists in a really interesting way that I'm excited to see how it all plays out.
So just to discuss some of the basic features that we will have going forward, obviously we'll have some of the more in-depth writing and stories that we've done in the past, but there's also quite a bit about the creative economy, and we're going to be doing a column called By the Numbers that explores the economics of a single show or an event or an album release or things like that, to really get into what it takes to put these things together and the impact it has on the greater area.
Something that you may see as like, oh, this is just something that happens around here all the time, but you don't know how much work and effort and money actually goes into making it happen and making it real and presentable.
And how many people, it takes to put together this piece of art or simple event or event you take for granted. We're also going to be, as Katie said, taking road trips. I think our first one will be to Catskill, which has seen a surge of investment and completely, it's undergone a radical change thanks to, I think, the artists who have moved in, and we'll be profiling some of them and showing you some of the spots that are worth visiting. And we'll have that consistently, month to month. And, our group of columnists, I think, will grow and expand, and we really hope you'll read some of them and think, oh, I have something to add to that conversation and reach out. So, we're just glad to finally be here,
Yeah.
and we hope to have more of a conversation over the next, forever.
Yeah, exactly. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. And we're here with Nadine Medina from Troy Dance Factory. Welcome.
Hi.
Nadine is our dance columnist for The Collaborative. And just to start and introduce yourself to everyone, why don't you tell us a little bit about the factory and what it is that you do as a choreographer for the institution?
That's a big question. Yeah. Okay, I'm preparing myself.
You're like, let's mentally lay it out.
I'm like, okay. There are no answers, though. So Troy Dance Factory is sort of a hybrid studio experience that caters to ages 4 and up. Right now, I think our oldest dancer is 80.
Amazing.
And we have commercial-based classes and technique-based classes. And typically, studios are considered recreational or competition studios. So you either go to the studio because you just want to have fun and, or a parent makes you go or something, or you go to a studio typically to have a professional career. And that oftentimes means you're on a comp team. And so I wanted a studio that would provide an experience for both of those types of dancers of all ages. So it's kind of the great experiment of studios right now. And what I do as a choreographer, I choreograph.
Yeah, right.
So one of my favorite parts of choreographing is actually the music and the story. So not that there's always a story when you choreograph, but when there is, it helps drive the movement a lot. So I love exploring new music and seeing what kind of movement it brings out of my body. And I think seeing the growth as a choreographer from when I started when I was like 15 to now is also one of my favorite parts. I'm like, oh, wow, I thought that was really good a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, that's in the feature that's going to be coming out soon about the dance class that you've just recently started and was extremely successful at Troy Dance Factory.
Yeah.
That was one of the most interesting parts of the conversation I had with you about sort of like how you find those movements and how valuable they are to piecing them together in a piece of choreography, and just like how you find them in little parts of your daily life, which is just a really fascinating way, because I think people have this idea of like, oh, choreographer is just like spending hours in the studio, like trying to figure out, like standing in front of a mirror. Like it's very much like this old, I don't know. I think of what's that movie, Benjamin Button, like when like the woman is like this really dedicated and like ballet dancer, and she's always in, and then it's just, but it can also just be hanging out in your kitchen or like
that's so. And I actually used to be the person who would say like, all right, well, I'm going to spend 3 hours today choreographing for this piece, and I would force the process. I'd go into the studio and I'd listen to the music over and over. I call it like meditating on the music. I'd lay down and close my eyes and try to envision movements. And one of the most frustrating parts that I think a lot of choreographers will tell you is they'll see all these awesome things in their head.
Yeah.
They create all this great stuff, and then they go to do it, and it gets lost in translation, either in translation or it just goes out of their head completely. And they're like, I can't remember what I just pictured. So it can be a really frustrating experience. But what I've learned over the last few years is how not to force that process. So I try to listen to the music long in advance, like before I actually want to choreograph it. And the brain keeps working, And I find when I'm in a relaxed state, which usually means that I'm trying to go to sleep, I see choreography, I get up out of bed, I video the concept really quickly, and then I go back to bed. And next thing I know, I've got an entire class worth of choreography from just doing it when it comes to me when I'm cooking or brushing my teeth or going to bed or walking my dog or something.
I mean, from reading Katie's story, which also deals with, the work you're doing with local music, it does seem that a lot of what the Troy Dance, studio is about is it's very organic. I mean, and it isn't as strict in some ways, but it seems that sort of creativeness and openness leads to more exciting things for you and for the people that attend.
Yeah.
I mean, I was struck by that. And your columns are right on the money in terms of what we're trying to talk about.
Very honest.
Yeah.
Love it. They're so excellent.
But, your column about that will be out shortly on improvisation, I mean, and sort of daring to get over that fear and let yourself go. And even what you're just discussing about the idea that, obviously your brain is working and sleeping. I've spoken to a number of creatives lately who talk about that from, my own work as a writer or painters, et cetera. You wake up or just before you sleep, you've got this idea and learning how to capture those ideas and things. I mean, that's such a useful thing for young artists and to realize that you can give yourself that space and it's not about a rigid smashing your head against the mirror.
And I talk about that in the piece too, is that the more you learn to improvise and the more you practice improvisation, the easier it is to recall your creative thoughts. So I know as a choreographer, before I was practicing improv, I would see these thoughts or not even have as many of them. And so it would take me hours to come up with a 64 count section to teach, which is typical actually in choreography, but really not efficient and not a really fun process. And then I started doing improv, and not only did the thoughts come more freely, but the ability to translate what you see in your head or what you feel into actual movement, it's so much easier to do. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to think of the different forms of storytelling when we think about like words or music or movement and how they're all different. And it's kind of that thing where one is saying things that the other can't. And when you put them together, it's just like this really, I don't know, inclusive space to be performing in. I mean, what is it like to explore those feelings, I guess?
So anyone who's danced with me will tell you that I love being sad and morose in the studio. Most of my music, and it's really funny, most of my music is really depressing. But I listen to like a lot of Bon Iver and James Blake and, Hayden Callan and stuff like that. And, but also, Earth, Wind and Fire and whatever. We have our fun. But, so it's really sad. And, tapping into that is scary as anything. It's not fun. But the movement that you can get, the fresh movement that you can get from tapping into actual true emotion without self-criticism or fear is movement that you never would have thought you could do. And it's funny, like, when you have like a really strong sense of your body relative to where it is in space and you do a move that you haven't done before, your brain fires in a completely different way. Like, like, oh, I'm not seeing what I'm doing, but I can feel that I've never done that before. And so that's one of the cool things about using emotion. It's scary, but I think it can take you to a whole new place when you tap into it. But sadness tends to be the one I work with the most. Fear, insecurity. We do a lot of introspection and self-reflection through music. Yes. I know you can hear it too.
All of a sudden there's like a screaming
sounds of children.
I believe those are the kids that take arts classes upstairs, so it's all appropriate. They're tapping into their emotions.
They're starting right up. They're walking right into it. They'll only be laughing for so long.
Oh, God.
Like, laugh while you're young.
Enjoy it. Oh, man.
I sort of forgot where some of this question was going.
Okay. Jumping off of that, where we were at before, she's already crying. We tapped right into it.
Come to join us.
Come join our conversation. Having just visited Troy Dance Factory once, it was such an interesting experience to be there for that one of those dance classes, because it is such an open space to explore those emotions, and everybody's very open to everyone else and very not like forgiving, but just like, yes, you can occupy this space and I will make a space for you. And like, as long as you make a space for me too. And everybody's kind of like, it's just like very open. So I think I just wanted to like address that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually, it's funny because people watching this might think that we've had that conversation. We really haven't. I didn't tell you that. You just said it. You're just not paid to say this. But it's funny you say that because that's one of the most common things that people do say about the studio is, there's space to explore. It's non-judgmental space. My rule is literally like be nice or go home. And when you make it clear that you only tolerate a certain type of behavior and respect in a space, and then you give that space, and you share of yourself with the people that you're asking to share as well, it really, really beautiful things happen. And one of the things I say is like, sometimes I'll say, oh, we have the best people at Troy Dance Factory. And then sometimes I'll hear myself say, well, even if that isn't the case, people when they come to Troy Dance Factory bring their best selves.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to have a space like that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of saying it, I think.
Yeah, because I think it's important to accept that people have a lot of parts to them. It's like I tell my dancers all the time, one of the things we talk about is giving yourself permission to be a certain type of person without feeling like you have to label yourself as that kind of person. So when I'll say like, you deserve to like totally pat yourselves on the back for how awesome you are because you are amazing and you need to look in the mirror and be like, I'm amazing. You can do that in this space and not be afraid that you're going to walk out of here and be a cocky, arrogant human being. It's not going to fundamentally change who you are as a person, but you can still give yourself permission to be that when you need to. So that's one of the things that happens there. And yeah.
So I'm wondering, given Troy's explosion in creatives and steady growth as a city that's known for its creative economy, I guess in some ways, what's it been like to be in the middle of that? Have you gotten more attention? Are you able to work with more folks than you were when you first started? Have you seen any growth in general in that direction?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I started the studio. We actually just had on Thanksgiving our 8th anniversary.
Wow.
So I started the studio, I guess, 8 years ago. That's, to be assumed by the anniversary. But, and at the time, like, the Riverfront Park wasn't even redone. It was the old park, and, I mean, downtown had so few budding businesses, and not a whole lot of artistic ones. Troy Music Academy had opened maybe 4 months before I had opened. Movement Lab had already closed, and that was it. I mean, that was pretty much it. We didn't have restaurants and cafes the way we do now. And I also, at the time, wasn't very active in the local business community. It wasn't a very active community. So it was very much a, like, pick yourself up by the bootstraps kind of experience. And I kept to myself, actually, quite a bit, which is a lot of how I am as a human being, too. So I guess I brought that into the business. But I think I opened my doors and... true story, at the time, I had a full-time job as an engineer. So I was a consulting engineer, still am actually, but way less time. And I was working full-time, and I had a feeling that my bosses wouldn't be thrilled to find out that I was opening a dance studio because my intent was to do both. And I didn't want anybody giving me less responsibility. My career was budding. My reputation as an engineer was budding. And so I kept it a secret. And I kept it such a good secret that only my friends came to my grand opening.
Yeah.
And I think I had like 26 students my first year. I was like, well, that backfired. So I ended up telling my bosses, and I also really respected them and wanted them to know. But I was like, well, this isn't going to work if I don't feel like I can be open about it. So I had like 26 dancers my first year, and I have 270 some odd dancers now.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
I mean, the engineering, I wasn't aware of the engineering degree, but I mean, I imagine that must play into dance in, a lot of ways.
Oh,
in the human form. And
It's funny. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just wondering, I would assume maybe you have some other engineers that come to the studio. I mean, I wonder if
Yes.
if there's a
Lots.
discussion about that and dance more because of where you are and who you are? I mean, just
I think it's actually served us all really well because
Yeah.
lots of times you go to a dance studio and the dance teacher has been dancing their whole life and they are very right-brained and
Right.
super creative and that's an awesome experience too because people who are like that think of things that I don't think of, which is also why I like to surround myself by other artists
Yeah.
to help pull me
Yeah.
there. But yeah, I love engineering. I've always loved math and science. I'm actually beaming as we're talking about it. I feel like a total nerd. But yeah, we're also located in Troy, where our PI is. And so a lot of our dancers are in the science and engineering fields or are RPI students. So we have a ton of either current or future engineers, scientists. We have nurses, doctors, surgeons, computer engineer, like it runs the gamut, but there are quite a few. We even have a guy who used to come in, our 80-year-old dancer, come in with the little notebook and the pen in his pocket because he was an engineer from years back from RPI, and he still would come into dance class with the button-down short sleeve shirt with a pocket and all of his engineering tools. So yeah, but it plays into dance quite a bit because it plays into owning a business too because you have to have some left brain tendencies to, I think, run a business effectively. But I mean, dance is counting and structure. At least for me, that's how I approach it. Structure,
Right.
counting, planning. I actually do spreadsheets for my choreography,
wow.
which is
That's the greatest thing ever.
I call them maps. They're spreadsheets.
That's so great.
So
Even better.
yeah. But it's great because I create a spreadsheet and then I can share it with my dancers and they can see like this is the time, this is the concept, this is what's happening, and then like the notes about like the story are there and
Right.
the props are on the other page and
Love
it's-
it.
Yeah,
It's all set up.
I'm a spreadsheet dancer.
Yeah.
I mean that's got to be unique in a number. I mean, I know.
Yeah, you're laughing.
No. I think it's. I mean, I actually what I'm thinking is it sounds like a good column, but but yeah, I mean, and it feels very unique to Troy in some ways, and it might not be. I don't know, but that's
The
really
studio
cool.
or creating spreadsheets
well, sort of that
art.
that community of engineers, and having that and people who are coming and able to digest what you hand them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's cool because every single class that I teach at the studio has improv in it.
Mm-hmm.
Whether I'm giving it away now. People are gonna be like, "Oh, I'm not coming."
They're like, great. Well,
They're
now
like,
I
"Oh,
know.
that heels class ain't happening." So every class has some type of improv or freestyle guided. I never just put the music on and say go. But it's really interesting to have engineers coming to the studio and really left brain people coming to the studio having that experience for the first time and seeing that growth and that tapping into emotion a little bit more. I'm not saying they don't have emotion. I'm speaking just in terms of being more of a left brain person.
Right.
It's really, really cool to see, and it definitely does create, I think, a fuller human experience.
Yeah.
For sure.
Definitely. It's just interesting to think about, people's experiences, because it's like when you're talking about like different parts of the brain and like those like stereotypical boxes that we put people in, and like, well, they can only think this way and they can only think this way.
Yeah.
But when you like mash them together, it's like, well, I mean, what is that like to watch play out in terms of watching people learn how their bodies move, or like being comfortable enough to move in that way?
There's big differences between the people who come to me who are very left-brained and engineering-based and those who are more right-brained, how they move and how they digest the information. The expectations they have on how I deliver it is really interesting too.
Yeah.
The engineers in the room right away based on the questions they asked you after you give them a bit of choreography. Very specific questions, a lot of timing-based questions. Literally, where do the fingers go here? It's very, 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 very direct and focused. And how they move tends to be, honestly, a little bit more literal and shape-based.
Yeah. Like angles and such.
Yeah.
Is what the first thing that came to my mind.
It's a lot more literal. However, I also have to say that the how quickly they pick up on choreography. Those memorization skills and those patterns, they are fast.
Yeah.
They are. I have one guy who started taking tap with me, and it was at the end of our 10-week session. I asked him again, like, tell me, you've taken tap before? And he's like, I took it for like 2 weeks years ago. And I'm like, you're amazing. And he's the second male engineer who's taken a tap class with me, who I'm literally like stunned that they hadn't done it before, because they connect with
Like
that.
patterns.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's crazy. And they're
So
taking notes during class and putting the notebook
Oh,
away.
man.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's like it's a different process, but you give
Absolutely.
space for it, and then the other people get to benefit from their questions.
Yeah.
because they don't think to
They
ask
wouldn't
those
ask those
questions.
questions, but they're still getting the answers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, most of this is me as a writer being jealous of someone with that capability.
right.
Someone who can't touch math and science. But,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I feel like that was my reaction to the spreadsheet. It was like if somebody handed me that, I'd be like, God. Yeah. Somebody's got to. I've got to watch a video or something. Like I'd have to look at it to see. But it's giving the space to all those different people with different learning abilities and methods.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
So which I didn't even know about. This is so cool.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, we do a lot of like group teaching too. So one of the things I like to do in my classes where there's choreography, not so much the technique classes, because it's good for me to really teach those.
Yeah.
But like we'll come into the studio and we'll do our warm up, and I'll say like, I'm going to give you one full song to just talk with each other, ask each other questions about the choreography we did last week, where you're unclear, etc. And they'll break off into groups and teach each other. And I think that's been a really cool thing too, because you have this mix of people who learn all different ways, asking each other for clarifications, and someone will say something to them in a way that I didn't, and it'll click. So
Right.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
so do you have thoughts about, just on the other side of this, for folks who are very interested in dance but might not know how to get to sort of, where to watch it, where to see performances locally? Do you have suggestions for how folks should go about and be consumers of dance or patrons of dance, I should say,
That's a
in the
great
area?
question. Yeah.
I mean, obviously we have the Dance Museum in Saratoga, but at the same time, I think it might be a little harder for folks to discover the local scene.
Yeah, like I would say Jacob's Pillow, obviously that requires
Yep.
people, going to Jacob's Pillow. They also do a lot of community-based things over the summer, which are really cool and open to people of all levels and all interests. Obviously, there are some dance companies around that I would highly recommend, supporting and being a patron of. And they're all different. And just because you don't understand or connect with it, but if you still love dance, I think it's really important to go and consume it. Especially artists, consume art.
Yeah.
Whether you get it or not. Art isn't meant to be gotten, it's meant to be consumed and thought about and impactful. So it's a bonus if you understand it. So and also go to local studios shows and recitals.
Yeah.
I mean, I show them love and support. There's nothing better than at your show seeing faces of people that you don't know, and you ask them, who do you know here? And they're like, I just heard about it. I just came. I think that's really great too. And if for people who want to get into dance, depends on the age. Unfortunately, dance is one of those fields where there's a clock. So if you are a kid and you want to be a professional dancer, I would say seek out a competition studio, although I personally get comp dancers who get comped out and they come to TDF because we do videos and we do choreography composition classes. We teach our dancers how to create choreography and structure that process, and we'll help them with college audition videos and things like that too.
Cool.
So find a studio that works for you, not just for your technique, but for your goals. And if you're an adult and you want to get into dance, find a great adult studio where you feel like you can just grow and be around people that are friendly and fun. And don't be afraid to go to New York City and take a class at Broadway Dance Center or Steps or Brickyard or Brickyard. forget the name of the studio. But BDC and steps are big ones, you know? So put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's next for Troy Dance Factory? Do you have any upcoming classes or projects you want to let people know about?
I do, actually. Thanks for asking. So I do actually have the new session online. So we actually are wrapping up our fall session right now, and we're starting our winter session in January, and all those classes are up, including the local music choreo class where we have new local musicians. I don't think we really talked about that in this podcast yet.
didn't.
No, we should.
But yeah, maybe this would be a good segue to that, and then
yeah.
I'll come back to the other thing that's happening.
Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit about how it all came together, like the idea of it?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So working with Chromoscope actually is really what brought me to the local music scene. And if anyone watching this podcast doesn't know what Chromoscope is, you did a podcast with them a couple months ago.
It was a while ago. Yeah. I think over the summer.
Yeah.
In like June or something.
Time goes
I
by
know.
really quickly.
Because it was
week.
for Sean Rao's culinary videos he's doing.
Oh, yeah. Can I eat this?
But I
Yeah.
mean,
Love
obviously,
those.
Chromoscope is
Right.
ubiquitous in terms of all the videos
Yeah.
they've done for a
So
lot of the
much.
artists. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty amazing.
So I hired them a couple years ago to do our big rooftop Beyonce Heels video to 6-inch, and they're awesome, and they were just kind of starting to really like get the gears moving
Yeah.
for themselves at that time, and I loved working with them. I loved the product that they put out, and I've become really close with them, and in that experience, I've met and become aware of a ton of local musicians that I wouldn't have otherwise even known about. And I was like, these people are amazing. These musicians are awesome. And they're really good people too. Like I enjoy them as human beings
Right.
and also their music. And there's a lot of, the trend now on Instagram is like short videos to like, Bieber and Ariana Grande and, whatever, all these budding artists. And it's great when they can hashtag and tag and get more notoriety when they post these dance videos to these artists. And that's wonderful. But I don't know. It depends on your reason for wanting to do things, right? There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it at all. I've done it too, but I also thought, well, why can't we do that to our local musicians as well, as long as they're
Right.
interested in it?
Yeah.
So I actually reached out to all of them first and asked their permission and told them my concept. And so this session, I worked with James Rock, I worked with the Sea, and I worked with Dark Honey. And so they all were super excited about this idea of their music being used for a class dedicated to choreography. So
Yeah.
there's no technique taught in the class, which is like contrary to a lot of things that I'm like all about is technique foundation, but it's okay.
Yeah.
And at the end of the session, the deal was we do a video with Chromoscope for each of these pieces. And so all the artists throughout the season provided us either with audio clips or came into the studio, which you were there that one night, and told the dancers what the purpose of the song was, what the impetus behind the music was. And then I created a piece based on that vision. The dancers learned it. And yeah, so it was an awesome session. It was one of our biggest classes that we have.
Yeah.
It was beautiful, and there's something about connecting with the artist whose music you're utilizing that is
And learning about that purpose.
it's really cool. Especially the Sea came into the studio and talked to the dancers about the song, and All Go Right was a song, and it's a beautiful song, and explained like not only the song but that section of the song that we were using, you know?
Which was also really interesting to learn about, just that section, how it was like such a last minute addition to the song. They're like, we don't know, we just like threw it in. So we couldn't come up with anything. It's like,
we had no words to express
exactly
what the feeling was. So it was like not going to be there originally at all, which it was really cool. It's like, oh man, so the bridge is my favorite part of like any song. So I was really happy that was there. And so we're actually filming next week with Chromoscope, all three of those pieces, and the bands are going to try to be there. I know James is going to try to be there, and the Sea is going to try, and hopefully we'll get Dark Honey to go, and we'll do it again next season. So that's part of what is on the dock the docket.
Yeah.
Right? That makes
Docket,
sense.
I think.
Docket. Shouldn't colloquialisms and cliches.
should
I'm
know
not.
this.
Yeah, I'm not good at that.
It's on the docket.
Docket. So yeah, that's on the schedule for
Yeah.
January is another local music choreo class, and Girl Blue is going to be part of that. She was supposed to be part of this last one, but I was overly ambitious. And
Yeah.
so yeah, and if anyone doesn't know these artists, you have to look them up. They're amazing. And yeah, but also coming up is the choreo ball, which I don't know if we've talked about before.
No, I don't think so.
So it is a show that is all student-produced choreography.
Okay.
So it's open to anyone taking a performance class at the studio, ages 14 up, and they get to produce their own choreography under mentorship from either myself or one of my other 2 instructors. So they learn how to structure choreography, how to edit music. They learn about staging and blocking, and it's a requirement that they work with other dancers at the studio in their piece. So there's no solos, and they have to make friends. And we put on a show in February.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be March this year, but yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think jumping back to the local music class, I think it's something that's so valuable not only for the dancers but for the musicians, because just thinking on the See the Seas video that's going to be out, not having the words to express that part of the song, it's just interesting that the dance was able to communicate something else. It's like those kinds of things are so valuable to the artist to see how their songs are being interpreted in different ways. And it's just like, I don't know, I'm excited to see the final product. I think it's going to be great. And that to see how this class continues to build with other artists and get more people involved, I think it's going to be a really exciting thing for like the local music community and the local dance community.
I'm really excited about it too.
Yeah.
And specifically that piece is choreographed around a personal experience that I had. So in talking to Chuck and Mara about the song, I couldn't come up with a concept right away. I just kept coming up with visuals and things that I was like, that's so cliche. Like how do I choreograph a diamond being made from pressure? Like I can't do that. You know, like all these things are coming up. And like Twyla Tharp has this book called The Creative Process, Learn It and Love It or something like that. And it was a life-changing book to read. And one of the things that she says, she does in her seminars, I promise this relates to what I just said, is like she'll be standing up in front of a room and she's got a bench that she uses, or a stool that she uses. And she says, all right, well, now we are going to, one by one, volunteers will come up and tell me different uses for this stool. But you're not allowed to say, like the next person coming up isn't allowed to say anything that was previously said. So the first person comes up and says sitting on it. Okay, standing on it. Okay, putting it on your head. So all these like basic ideas come up, and then, you know, you get the 18th person coming up and they have to say something like that's completely out of the box.
Yeah.
So I was trying to tap into Twyla Tharp's wisdom, and I just kept coming up with a diamond under pressure. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't get past the first like most obvious idea.
Yeah.
So so I ended up choreographing that piece around a really personal experience that I had. And yeah, it was really cool for the See the Seed, I think, to hear that.
Yeah,
And then I had a
absolutely.
creative meeting yesterday with Chromoscope, because like my rule is everything you add to the process should build on the last thing or get rid of it, like take it out if it doesn't. So one of the cool things with Chromoscope is like then their vision gets to add to the dance that added to the song,
Right.
And they get to take some creative liberties, especially more so this time with how to tell those stories in a dance video. So I won't give away what it's gonna look like, but I'm super excited about it. But yeah, putting movement to words is cool to interpret, but yeah, in this case, like you said, there were no words. It's just
you're just gonna have to move to it.
yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us.
Thank you.
And folks who want to learn more about everything we've talked about today, on the website there'll be the feature on those classes is available, as is a gallery of the See the Seas visit and your column. So there's a lot of stuff to explore.
A lot of
Folks want to
I can see what we're
Very
talking about.
and I can't wait to read more of your columns, honestly, because I think
Thank
just
you.
the exploration of process and being a creative is so valuable. So that is exactly what I think the collaborative is about. So thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.